right. Well, welcome to the lunch break with Josh and Ted Wachtel. And we're happy to have you here. We really are making this a lunch break. We're going to have a pretty informal conversation and invite you guys to ask questions and just kick off the new year with some reflections on how we're building a new reality and what we're trying to do together. And just to show you that we're doing something different, I'm going to kick this off with a song because it's time to rev it up and go. Going downtown, tell you what I'll do. I'm gonna buy me a Mercury or two, and then I'll rev it up and go. I'm gonna step it up and go. I'm gonna buy me a Mercury and cruise it up and down the road. Me and my baby, a Saturday night, sitting on a corner waiting for the green light. We're gonna rev it up and go. We're gonna step it up and go, man, go. I'm gonna buy me a Mercury and cruise it up and down the road. Now there's a little place straight across town. You walk right in and then you sit right down and then you rev it up and go. We're gonna step it up and go, man, go. I'm gonna buy me a Mercury and cruise it up and down the road. Oh, there's a little place, yeah, yeah, yeah. Ooh, yeah. Get this thing in gear. Well, now I had a woman, stole her from a friend. Fool got lucky, yeah, he stole her back again. We're gonna rev it up and go. We're gonna step it up and go, man, go, man, go. I'm gonna buy me a Mercury and cruise it up and down the road. Well, the front door's shut and the back door too. The blinds pulled down, now tell me what you gonna do. You gotta rev it up and go. We're gonna step it up and go, man, go. Oh, riding in a Mercury, I'll cruise it up and down the road. Hey now, some folks say a politician won't steal. I found 3 in my cornfield. Yeah, we're gonna rev it up and go. We're gonna step it up and go. I'm gonna buy me a Mercury and cruise it up and down the road. Let's try to put it into overdrive. Oh yeah, we're cooking with gas. Me and the devil walking down the street now. Who we bump into but the chief of police. You gotta rev it up and go. You gotta step it up and go, cat, go. Yeah, riding in my Mercury, cruise it up and down the road. I'm going downtown and lay it on the line. I'm gonna buy me a Rocket 99 and then I'll rev it up and go. Gonna step it up and go. I'm gonna buy me a rocket and cruise it around the sun and moon. Whoa, me and the devil racing through hell, riding in my rocket, just listen to me, yeah. Woo, yeah, riding in my rocket, cruising around the sun and moon. Yeah, warp 10. All right. Well, welcome, folks. Let me see if I can get this light to come back on. Of course, it died right as I was starting. Welcome to this webinar and this series, and we're so happy you're here. If you have questions, we do want to make this interactive as we go along, so feel free to use the old question and answer or use the chat. In fact, right now, if you want to just chat in where you're from, where you're zooming in from, that would be great.
Set it for everyone before
Oh yeah, all
when
right,
you're
I'm gonna do
typing
that.
in. Uh,
All right, look, I need to fix this light. So while I'm doing this, I'm going to get my dad to kick this off. And, I've been thinking a lot about where we came from. My dad's been working on this for over 10 years since he left the IRP. It's been over 25 years since the IIRP, the International Institute for Restorative Practices graduate school that he founded, was incorporated in 2000. And it's been nearly 50 years since he's been an entrepreneur in this kind of social innovation field, working with teens. So, Dad, how did this all start? What inspired you to start working on this, and what was your vision at that time? I know when you founded the Community Service Foundation. Oh, I need to enable the chat. All right, so sorry, folks. I'm going to do that right now. Chat, everyone. There we go. Okay. And I'll ask you again now. Yeah, now you should be able to
there's
type.
a raised hand from Donna Biggs, which may have related to what you just did.
Yeah, yeah, that's what it was. Okay, great. All right, so when you started out on this road, like 50 years ago, dreaming of a new reality, what was it about for you?
Well, I quit my job in the public schools. That was the most important thing I did. I had worked there for 8 years. I was really disappointed with education. I was disappointed in the way we were treating kids. Um, there was a lot of, I guess, the revolution of the that came out of the Vietnam War era and so forth, created a lot of changes in the relationship between authority and people who are subject to the authority. And I saw it playing out in schools in a very disappointing way. When kids did inappropriate things, it was mostly throwing them out of school. There were kids who, seemed to have drifted away from norms that, were typical of the 1950s, 1960s, and into the 70s. What we saw was a dramatic change. So, how do you respond to that? And how do we deal with kids who are on a negative path in life? And both my wife and I were teaching. Susan and I, she was teaching third grade, I was teaching secondary school, and got really interested in kids who were getting in trouble. We had some folks from a local county group home bring kids by. I had left the history classroom and had started a cable TV station that kids ran and a media center. I worked with teachers in audiovisual and I helped kids make things. And I had some kids coming in at night from a county group home, criminal justice offenses, had brought them into the courts, and some of these kids were living in a nearby home. And Susan and I both ended up being volunteers and just got fascinated with the whole question of, well, what do you do if people are on a negative path in life? How do you get them to change? And in fact, that became our quest for many years. In 1977, I quit my job. My wife had already quit it because we had kids. And I quit my job and we decided to start a community service foundation, which was basically a place that gave kids a kind of a timeout. We weren't officially licensed as a school. We were actually trying to address behavior. And we met during the school day, but it was actually a juvenile court program, not funded by the schools. And, as you do when you get into those situations, it's sink or swim. You learn all the things you're doing wrong. I had a lot of silly assumptions about how people change. And as time went on, we got better at it. And somewhere, I guess it was in the mid 90s, we'd gone through a lot of efforts. We'd opened schools, group homes, drug and alcohol programs. At that point, in the 90s, we had, I think, almost 16 group homes, 8 schools, and we were taking kids right out of the public schools, not just from the courts. We were taking them from drug and alcohol. And I ran into this thing called restorative justice. A guy named Terry O'Connell came to visit uh, Pennsylvania.
I'm gonna cut you off and just wait for that story because I just wanted to, I feel like it's interesting because I remember, when you quit your job in 77, 76, and just being like a 5-year-old kid. And I think, I mean, just to share a little bit of how, one person's decisions affect another person, like, you know, first of all, to know that you could just change what you were doing. Like that was a thing people could do. Like, I don't like what I'm doing. And it was kind of drastic because you were doing a doctorate program and everything. I mean, it was a big like, nope, not doing this. There's too much wrong with this system. And the bravery to just kind of strike out to do something else, that affected me. And then I think the other thing, you ended up writing a book, which is beyond the schoolhouse, and which you published, 5, 6 years ago, I think. And that was, grappling with the school system as a system and, beginning to imagine alternatives. And, I just remember like hanging out as a kid at CSF, at Community Service Foundation, at the schools. And I mean, you had, first of all, you were working with, I remember, everybody was saying, these are the toughest kids in Southeast Pennsylvania. But like, I was a 6, 7, 8-year-old kid. They were great. They were so nice to me. I mean, and we even had some of them living in our house in the foster home. And, it's just like, wow, how can the reality that society presents about these people and the reality, speaking of reality, building a new reality, dreaming of a new reality, the reality was so different even then. These were kids. They were kids. Yeah, they had gotten into trouble. They had done things. Some of them were tough. Some of them, were hard to connect with, right? But, seeing, okay, we can, and then you were working in all kinds of creative ways with them at that time. It was, you built a mini farm. You were really into Buckminster Fuller. You built a dome and that farm out there. And there was a food co-op that was like right next to the school program. And you would do fun stuff like take the kids bowling. Well, what does that do? Well, actually, they were learning math, keeping score of the bowling, and you would invite me sometimes to skip school and join you on those trips. It just, I don't know, the flexibility of life, the flexibility of working with those kids, it really made an impact on me.
Well, the premise for me was learning by doing, that if you actually These were obviously kids who were not responding well to structured school. And by creating experiences, by teaching them organic farming, we built a dome, we did a lot of really unusual things, but it's learning by doing. And it really is a way for people to uh, improve their lives, change things, and they can do it in their own lives once they realize that you don't have to go to school to do it. And of course, the irony is that you ended up at what I was really trying to build, but wasn't able to. I got money from the courts, and they would pretty much let me do anything if it would result in kids' behavior improving. And so a lot of what we did was very practical. When kids arrived, we asked them to tell us whether they wanted to be here or not. They couldn't just show up and blame it on everybody making them go. We said, no, you have to decide to come. And from that premise, uh, basically, we began to build a whole set of programs. And uh, when we took the philosophy of learning by doing and asking kids to take responsibility for themselves, and I remember a particular incident in a school in Easton, Pennsylvania, where I went to visit a junior high there that had like 20 or 30 kids in it with a special, the school had been set aside, and these kids had just had what they described as a racial incident and a fight. And they were sitting down the hallway. I asked, what are they doing sitting in the hallway? He said, well, they're figuring their demerits. There was no conversation. Nobody actually talked about the wrongdoing that was going on. So that was the beginning for me of steering in a different direction. And Susan worked with me. Lee Rush, I think who's here today, showed up. He was our first employee. And honestly, we began to make mistakes that we learned from, and we got better at what we did. And it's the premise, for pretty much everything we've been doing since. Um, so,
Well, I love that story you told in Real Justice book about the kids on the playground
uh,
and that they had come from the other school. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
well, we realized that this stuff actually works. We had a guy came down from Boston and helped us start doing groups, and we would get kids together and talk about things in a real way. And it seemed like we were getting great cooperation considering how these same kids would behave in a school. But one day we got it put to the test in a different way. We had a group of kids that came up from an alternative school near Philly. They were all delinquent, that is, adjudicated delinquent kids. And they came up to play baseball with us on the playground in Sellersville, Pennsylvania, a little ballpark. And we went to lunch. We broke for lunch. And apparently, one of the kids stole stuff, a sandwich and a soda from a cooler, and took it with him. And our kids got back to the ball field as well as the kids on who were visitors. And one of our kids, who had only been with us, I don't know, a couple of months, he said, "We have to have a circle." And he confronted this kid for stealing from the store where all of them routinely buy their lunch. And he he got a response from the kid who was utterly shocked that a kid would. My dog is barking. Can you hear that? Oh, good. Okay. All right. He called the circle, and the kid who did the stealing resisted and cursed and didn't do it. But they started the circle, and kids went around from our school, and people were shocked. The other staff from the other place, even our own staff, because there were no adults involved in calling for the circle. And the kids sat down right there on the ball field and went around, and kids talked about how this kid was going to ruin it for them. They were going to be prohibited from going to Mr. Rader's store, what's his name? And um, and actually, the whole thing turned on the other kids starting to get in his fellow students getting annoyed with him. Like, what's the big deal? They're saying just go back and return the sandwich. There's no consequences. And at some point, the kids turned on him, both his own, and he, by sheer social pressure, went back and apologized and returned the sandwich. But for all of us who were watching this unfold, we didn't start it. The kids did. And that's when I realized how amazing this stuff could be. That people under the right circumstances will rise to the occasion. And in many decades now, I guess it's almost 50 years, we've been running our schools this way and getting really impressive outcomes because we're actually asking people to take responsibility for themselves in a way that's meaningful.
Yeah. 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 And of course, restorative justice is like attempting to take that to a bigger level and then take it everywhere. But like it's interesting, we're talking about something much bigger now, I think. And I don't know, did you feel at that time, like how big did you feel this was when this started? Did you just think it was going to happen maybe in schools or maybe,
No, I actually got a false signal from the Philadelphia Inquirer. So Terry O'Connell came up in the July of 1994, uh, and basically um, was presenting for juvenile court. I got invited because we contracted with juvenile court, and he and a psychiatrist, Donald Nathanson, who's from Philly, spoke about Terry's work with this thing called restorative justice, or he was calling it at the time family group conferencing, uh, but with dealing with offenders and their families and having meetings where they would engage and bring victims and offenders and their supporters together. And in their telling about this, it really touched me. I mean, this was, it seemed so outrageous that you could actually bring people together in that way. And I think that's when I realized that this thing could really be a useful tool in our schools and otherwise. And then on Sunday, I think I saw him on Thursday or Friday, a weekday, at juvenile court. On Sunday, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the biggest newspaper in Philadelphia, had Terry O'Connell speaking to 50 cops on the front page top headline
Hmm,
of the Philadelphia Inquirer.
really? I didn't know that.
And I have a copy of it.
Yeah, yeah, we should post that.
Yeah. And it was like incredible that they thought it was important enough
Yeah.
to put it on the front page. Well, it never happened again. It was a fluke. I must have been a very slow news day. But it got me thinking like, oh my God, I was so excited when I heard this guy speak, and I really felt it could amount to something. And that gave me the impression this could be really big. Well, it took a lot of years to get it to the point that it really, you could say it's taking place in a lot of places, and it's changed in its nature. The possibility of bringing so-called restorative justice into the criminal justice system is still a struggle. And, we're
Yeah.
going to have some sessions coming up this spring on just that. Restorative justice, wherefore art thou?
Yeah.
There's restorative justice going on in the schools to a greater extent than in most of the courts. Now, I'm speaking of the United States, and I'm not as familiar anymore with what's going on in, other countries. And I'm hoping to get some folks from there to join us in the spring and talk about how's it going. But at that time,
Well, I
it
know,
was
yeah, I
incredible.
mean, I know that there's, a few years ago, I reached out to somebody locally here who was doing, where I live in Western Massachusetts and in Franklin County, which is, anyway, small county in Western Massachusetts. And they were, I think going back decades had been still, there was a woman still running a program. They were doing a lot of vehicular homicide, a case, yeah, well, it's serious,
Oh,
but where often it's not an intentional crime, but it's a terrible one. And so they were, meeting with victims' families in these cases, and she was handling other crimes. But then, she aged out. She resigned. She retired. And as far as I can tell, that program didn't continue. I think that happened a lot
It
where
happened
there
in a
were,
lot of places. There was a burst of interest in the mid 90s. A
yeah,
lot of the state juvenile courts and juvenile probation promoted it, but I don't know how much of it remains.
yeah. Well, when I was tickled. We attended the IRP World Conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee in October. And just to, as an aside, the theme was arts. And so that's was kind of gave me a kick in the butt of like, hey, you're a musician. You better include arts in your restorative work. So that's partly why I was inspired to do a song today. And we'll keep doing that. Um, but we were sitting at lunch and it was great. We had lunch with some folks from, I'm going to get it wrong. Was it Madison, Wisconsin?
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
it,
so.
yeah, okay. They came as a team. There were, four of them, I think, and they were doing restorative justice. And it wasn't just youth, it was young adults as well. And they were, it was a permanent department. It was beyond, pilot programs, I think is the way it started in the 90s. I remember, this pilot, that pilot, but then the grant funding ran out or whatever it was. But this was, and I thought
No, it
about
was
featuring
impressive
them.
what they were talking about. They were systematically do these. They were doing these. They were carrying a lot of cases.
Yeah.
So it was the
Yeah,
real
and
deal.
they had the cooperation with the police, which is obviously essential, and they had the cooperation with the courts. Um, and I don't know, maybe we have people in our audience who are familiar with other programs that are really ongoing in justice. I mean, part of what we want to do in this series is survey. Well, let me pull it up. The what Ted is calling the six facets. Um, just to show the kind of the scope. I mean, it's gone, as we say, it's gone way beyond schools um, and just justice experimentation. But you know, we're the vision of what we're doing to audaciously say we're building a new reality. We're trying to get at what is the core, what is the kernel, what is the shift in thinking, that kind of unites empowering kids to work with each other in
Well, and this six facets of a new reality is an attempt to um, take a look at where we've been and have kind of a map to refer to where we'd like to go and to use it to describe what's been going on. So, for example, most of my adult life, professional life, I've been working in learning. And we use the most generic terms, not school, not education, but learning. And most of what I've done has been working with public schools and courts and drug and alcohol programs that have school elements to them. And we've worked in that way for years. We've also worked in justice. Mostly, we personally have mostly worked with juvenile offenders. We obviously had schools and group homes for kids from the courts. I'm sorry, day treatment programs. Excuse me. We've also worked in care, and the Community Service Foundation day program is essentially a care program. It's kids coming together. Uh, yes, they can get, various pieces of their degree and go back to school, and it includes the learning elements. But the goal is to change their behavior and to provide the kind of care and support for a lot of kids that involves drugs and alcohol, because that's, a pretty significant thread through the outrageous behavior we've experienced in our society since the 60s and 70s. But the six facets were an attempt to say, okay, so what are all the categories that we could be bringing restorative to? And governance is right now one of the most challenging for our society, not just the US, but in general. How do we govern? And the issue of governance isn't just, on a national basis or state level. How do you govern a classroom? How do you govern a school? How do you govern a workplace? The ways in which we can make decisions and make decisions about how that institution is going to operate can be far more inclusive and participatory than what we've done in the past. Uh, and just
Yeah, it's
enterprise.
so it's a vision of sort of a radical democratization.
Well, if we use the yeah, could you put on the yeah, just the whole idea is when we first did the continuum, we were talking about a range of activities from affective statements to formal conferences. So you might have up to maybe 10 people in a conference. The biggest one I remember, actually, it's in Terry O'Connell's handbook, but was one up in Vermont where I think there were 78, 80 people involved in processing a huge road race that kids had held through a series of towns in Vermont. And there's actually a diagram in there how you set up for that many people. But there are things happening now that echo the idea of restorative practices for dealing with conflict and wrongdoing and for making decisions as to how to deal with those things. So the formal conference was the extent, the right hand of the continuum up until a couple of years ago when I proposed that we expand it and we include other kinds of problem solving and conflict resolving. So citizens assemblies, we've been doing a lot of work about that. And the whole idea of getting large groups of people randomly selected to get together and actually work through a problem and actually try to find a resolution, how to have a process where people aren't fighting, much as we do in a formal conference. People are always afraid, oh, you're going to bring together the offender and the victim. They don't. They don't fight. They come with the intent of working through it. And that's what happens in citizens' assembly. So if you can go back to
Yeah.
the six facets. So it's in the area of governance that we're particularly interested in expanding the idea of doing things with people instead of to them or for them. The criteria for being on that continuum is that whatever activity it is, it's an engagement where people are actually having a voice, having a say, being part of the process, and not just doing things to them or for them. And can we take it to scale? I guess is really my greatest interest. And that would, in fact, be the most dramatic part of a new reality. Right now, we're dealing in the United States with a level of governance that's caused a level of disagreement about how governance should go. That's really distressing. And I don't want to get into contemporary politics and talk about any of that. I'm more interested in what's the process that can help bring us together. And we believe there's a way to do this through restorative practices. And in this specific case, through citizens' assemblies. And the other we mentioned there is community processing, which is being done in the Netherlands and getting large groups of people together who are involved in a problem and getting them all involved and having a say. The technology we have today is making some of this possible. How could you have a democracy and get everybody in the room? Well, in a way you can now because you can do it with Zoom. And
So I think, I've been thinking we didn't touch on enterprise right now, but of course that's another one. But the one that often we kind of aren't sure how to put it is spirit. And we're not, I mean, there has been work done in churches, of course, with mitigating conflicts in those kinds of settings. But I think what we're doing here is about the spirit too, because we're trying to envision uh, from sort of a basic idea. It's a really simple idea of working with people, that people should actually be included in all these things that affect them. I mean, it's really, I don't know, how different is that from the way things were when you grew up, Dad? I mean,
Well, I mean, basically, not so different from when you grow up. I mean, when you got in trouble in high school,
yeah,
or I would have, it's somebody talks at you.
right.
And they don't actually engage you and ask you what you should do or
Yeah,
what do you think.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
about a lecture and it's about handing out punishments.
yeah.
And it doesn't work to change behavior or the culture.
Yeah. So I mean, we have a bunch of people on the call here who are obviously sold on this notion that we can do things differently, or at least they're hopeful that that's possible. Um, and yet, everywhere we look, we say, okay, well, this could be better, that could be better, that could be different, this could be different. We could use these processes here, we could use these processes there, we could use this way of thinking to do X, Y, and Z. What, how do you build movements? How do you build this? I mean, you've seen it. You saw it by, all the work you've done out there, in the 90s is, just going out and training people and people were eating it up there and they still are. They're still hungry for a different way to do things.
Well, I think restorative justice, at least when I first encountered it in 1994, was a concept that had a very limited number of people involved with it. And John Braithwaite just shared a fact with me that I didn't know, and I need to check with him on his source. But he said that according to some studies, my light is not working. And according to some studies, that more than 50, was it 59% of American schools have become acquainted with restorative justice or restorative practices in some form and are using them. Unfortunately, with varying degrees of quality and fidelity. And one of the dangers of a large movement is some people are going to do it badly. I've seen some articles from conservative columnists who are legitimately saying these things are meaningless, and then they say you should be using punishment. But the confusion, it isn't punishment you need, you need accountability. And it doesn't have to be done simply by handing out punishments, as those of us who've been in restorative. But to what extent can you then take that uh, to other kinds of settings? And how long would it take to get people to buy into it? It's been, John says 59%, and it's been 25 years since I got involved in this. So uh, actually 30.
31? 31
Well,
years?
yeah. I mean, I
Yeah,
met Terry in 94.
right.
And the bottom line is it takes a long time. We made films, we've done trainings, we've run conferences. So what can you do with this uh, newer concept of citizens' assemblies? Well, it's going to take a lot of years to familiarize people with it. And well, I'll
Well,
mention
well, fortunately, we're not the only ones working on it. I mean, in fact,
in none of
we're
this.
in
Well,
mostly we're
part of it all.
highlighting other efforts that are underway, where people, cities, organizations that are doing citizens assemblies, um, and also I think we feel a resonance with the depolarization movements. Groups that are bringing people together to learn how to talk to each other who have different points of view.
Yeah, let me just say a little bit about that, because it would fit up on the right end of the continuum,
Yeah, I'll pull that up
getting
again.
large groups of people together. I went to one in Philadelphia, which I wrote about and distributed through our email for the website. But it was last November, a year ago, I should say, and basically, it was an event that's been used by the Braver Angels. And that's a national organization with like 50,000 members now. It's growing very fast, of people who are very concerned about the polarization and want to give people opportunities to learn how to talk to each other differently and have better conversations. So this particular event, Susan and I went to in Philly, I was going just as an observer, but they were going to have like 8 left-leaning volunteers and 8 right-leaning volunteers talking about the stereotypes of, so what does the other side think of us? What do they think's wrong with us? Which of that might be partly true? Just a very candid discussion of these. Well, as it turned out, I got there and one of the blue guys wasn't showing up, so I was asked if I'd volunteer, and it was a great experience. And for Susan watching the thing, you got to hear people talking to each other in a very real way about what they don't like about the other side, what they fear, what they think, why they're coming from where they're coming from. And in that hour and a half to 2 hours, it was kind of transformative, I think, for any of us who were there. Susan said, this was, by the way, just days after the election. Uh,
Yeah, right.
and she said, after listening to all these Republicans, I'm not so afraid anymore.
Yeah.
And it was a chance for people to have a real conversation.
Well,
Well,
we hear the most extreme voices and these social media platforms that pit people together to argue and television that pits people together to argue. And when you actually meet people, it's just like I was saying at the beginning, like those kids from, the worst kids in Southeast Pennsylvania. Oh my gosh, the people I disagree with probably live next door. They'd probably loan me money for that matter, or certainly a shovel, or, you know, and watch my kids for a couple hours, or, after school if I need it in a pinch or whatever. Like these are people we know, we care about. They would care about me. They're like and yet, God, and it seems so far right now with the political system as it is to get to sanity, which I'm pretty sure that a vast majority of people, I mean, so I've been thinking like the world religions, they were successful. I mean, every mother teaches their kids the golden rule. Not everybody follows it all the time, but I mean that's how we raise our kids, right? I hope, I think most people are doing that. We're trying to do it. And the society doesn't always support it. In fact, the societal goals are often greedy and again, wanting to pit because somebody else wants to try to get some power. So they divide. They divide and conquer.
so part of what we're doing here today and for the next 3 Wednesdays
Yeah.
is talking about this. I'm seeing a lot of nice stuff in the chat,
Yeah.
and I'm going to say this now, Josh, just because most of the people who signed up for this are not here. How many people can make it noon Wednesday Eastern Standard Time? So obviously we're sending it out. But I'd really like anybody who's watching it by themselves, and obviously people right now, to know that I would really welcome hearing from you. I already see things in the chat here that are helpful
Yeah.
about places that are doing restorative justice and what have you. And I think that we really need to have a conversation about it. So I'm going to say, could any of you who are listening to this on tape feel free to write to me? Obviously, you can't add to the webinar chat, but I'm at Ted Wachtel, building a new reality.com. Ted
I'm typing it
Wachtel.
in the chat.
Oh, thank you, Josh. And, if you have, first of all, one of the things I'm very interested in where of restorative justice going on an ongoing basis now. But any other thoughts and comments? Uh, I'm seeing people here, uh,
Well,
that
Kevin Jones has some
yeah.
good news for us from Illinois, and I was almost tempted to see if he wants to come on and say a word or two about it. I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot, Kevin. But if you want to, just say yes in the chat, and I could do that. But anyway, Joka Reichman says actually he's not sure that stuff that he was working on you with in The Hague is still happening in the schools. So that could be another example.
Right.
But
Ayoka, however, was in the early vanguard of people in that I dealt with in the Netherlands of trying restorative justice. But there's some amazing things going on in the courts. The criminal justice system, is actually following through. There have been changes in laws. I'm not going to get into that now, but that would be part of what I'd like to present later this spring on restorative justice. Where art thou? And get some folks, well, one guy in particular from the Netherlands that I'd like to share what they've been doing. But
Yeah. And I just noticed a few more folks chatting and I guess what I want to comment, and I noticed this when I went to the restorative, the IRP World Conference, a lot of people have restorative in their job titles. Restorative Justice Coordinator, Charlottesville City Schools, Restorative Justice Facilitator for Criminal Diversion at Central Virginia Community Justice. This is Bianca Johnson text. Oh, I should say, if you want to chat so everyone can see, you have to select. Otherwise, it's just Ted and I that are going to see it. Bianca, Riley. Oh, no, Riley, you did everyone. And okay, this is one of the folks we met in Chattanooga, great, who's talking about the RJ community-based program in Madison. But yeah, I just wanted to say, that is a positive trend I saw big time at the World Conference, is all the people who have restorative in their titles or they are restorative practitioners. This wasn't 25, 30 years ago, there was no such thing. There were teachers, there were people who wanted to incorporate restorative, but this is a job now that people are doing out in the world. It's a real skill that people have. That's big. I mean, I see that again. We want to celebrate the changes that we're seeing. Another thing is, I think a lot of people are either working in schools or departments or organizations or parts of organizations that are intentionally trying to be restorative. And that's big. Again, that was, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. I wish my department, I wish my school. So that's a change. It exists. Okay,
well,
Kevin says, work with tons of organizations on leading restoratively. Leading restoratively. Yeah, that's right. So that's the sort of the governance, sometimes enterprise piece of not just we do it with our clients, but we're trying to do it with the people we manage and with each other. And then the other thing I see is I believe that more and more of these restorative organizations or departments or groups, I understand they're not all monumental, are collaborating, are beginning to collaborate with other such entities. And
there,
and this is what when we talk about restorative community, we're sort of defining it, as an aspiration. But when, there's a synergy that starts happening when enough people do have this vision, right? I'm working from this vision and we're hoping, and I think that's the biggest part where we see with governance, like, we can push this to another level.
well, and I think that's when it starts to become what we're calling and going to be doing some programs on restorative community,
Yeah.
where we have a new book out. Kara Bolton wrote it
Yeah.
with us, the banner on restorative community. But she points out that when you have multiple areas of a community or a local society using restorative, you begin to get dramatically improved results because it's actually not just one part of the system working. One of the ones that I know of that's most exciting to me, and I see at least one person here from there, and that's in Gloucestershire in the UK.
Yes. Yes.
Well, it's not just that community, it's a bunch of communities that are working together. In fact, I just got an invitation to say a few words at a thing in June uh, because it's about working from schools, from the courts, social workers, and they're specifically using the language of restorative, and they also like to use the word relational, which a lot of people, uh, use sometimes interchangeably. But the whole idea of the six facets is that's what we want to do. We
Yeah.
want to get into all those
Yeah.
aspects of society in different ways. And what is it that would make it restorative? Well, it's doing things with people.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
And
it's it's democracy at the most fundamental grassroots level.
um, we get more and more people writing in, and I'm really excited. This is just the first time we've done this. We may be reaching out to some of you folks because Ted and I said we got to do something just a little more informal and see what kind of response we can and conversation we can cultivate. The six facets, I've had some. My dad wrote the paper. I think a year and a half. It's been out there, and I don't know. I should put the link in the chat to the expanding restorative
The whole notion of expanding restorative.
expanding restorative. We have that up for free on our website. I'm going to try to hope, I'm going to write the link, and I think I have the right link. We
Well, you can
want
just
you
go
to
to
read it. We want you to print it. We want you to share it. We have it in Spanish too, by the way.
and we'll soon have it in, hopefully in Portuguese.
Yeah. But this six facets, we think it's a good framework for really thinking critically about where we are, where we could be. And there's another idea about it, like the governance aspects of enterprise. Okay, so enterprise, uh,
Yeah, each of those facets can be a lens to look at the others.
right,
So, what would be the learning needs
right,
of care, governance, justice? What would be the learning needs? So, we're describing the six areas of social need. What would be the governance needs of? So, for example, Terry O'Connell and yeah, I think it was Lynn Doppler down in Australia some
that's
years
right.
ago did a work with a care home and for aging people.
Yeah,
And what they did was they created opportunities for people who lived there to have a meaningful say in what was going on, in what activities were, in planning. And it became a with instead of two or four, which is the norm in facilities where people are seen as dependent and needy. But it was very different. So he took a governance lens and looked at a care agency. So I think it's a way for us to, and by the way, I've been using this now for a decade, and honestly, I haven't found anything, that doesn't fit in the six categories. They're very generic. So when you say learning or care, it's about most generic term you can use. Um, were you typing away there to do
I
something?
I added the link to the article I
Oh,
wrote about that care home, Maranatha House.
well,
All
we're
right.
coming up on an hour here, Josh.
I
I'm sorry
know.
to
I
say.
feel like I want to end with a song and just thank everybody for being here with us for this lunch break. I feel really great and appreciate everybody writing in. It's really good to feel that we have this community and these people are doing this work. It may take, well, I don't know how long it's going to take. It's not an automatic to send out the recording. I'll have to send it out, but I'm ready to do it. So that'll go out to all the folks who attended and the folks who aren't here. Hello on the video if you are catching it by recording. We are going to be back next week, same time, same place. We're doing this 4 weeks in a row as a sort of a pilot. And yay, thanks for being here,
Yeah,
everybody.
and again, please feel free to write me with anything just at Ted Wachtel, building a new reality at buildinganewreality.com.
All right. So I'm going to end with one of my original songs. I wrote this a long, long time ago, and I changed it because we're living in different times. So it's now a gender neutral love song, but it's you got to find them, and we got to find what we're doing with this movement too. So thanks everybody for being here, and I'm going to take you out on this tune. They might be in Paris, they might be in Spain, They might be a lonely one, living in another name, but you must find them. You must find them, whoa, 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 someday. They might be a lonely one, they might have lots of friends. They might be somebody you never thought you'd see again, but you must find them. You must find them, whoa, 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 someday. They might be someone who has knocked 1,000 times on your door, but they might be somebody you have never, ever met before. They might be in Tanu 2 for 2. They might be someone who has knocked 1,000 times at your door, but they might be somebody you have never, ever seen before. One last thing could happen. You might have lost all hope. Things could be all spun around. You're dangling by that rope, and you will find them. You must find them, whoa, 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 someday. You must find them, and they will find you, and you'll find your way. Find your way. Find your way. You'll find your way. All right, folks. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next week. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.